Hi, this is Dr. Campbell. And so today we're going to talk about some leadership principles for the marriage. We're going to talk about teamwork. We're going to talk about the characteristics of a dysfunctional organization. We're going to have three activities. So make sure that before you get started today, that you printed everything up because you're going to need your activities. You may want to pause the video. You can do that and print everything you need. And then we're going to provide you with some tools that's going to enhance communication. And we're going to talk about managing conflict in the marriage. So one of the things I love about what I do is I love the promises of God. And in Exodus 3:7 through 8, it reads as follows. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land and large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. And so just as God promised the Israelites their promised land, he also has a promised land for your marriage. However, one of the challenges that I see is the alarming national divorce rate. It appears that the more times a person gets married, the less likely they are to have success. People who have been married for one time, they have a 50% chance of divorce. If you've been married 2 times, you have a 67% chance of divorce. And if you've been married 3 times, you have a 73% chance of divorce. And even when you look at the faith divorce rates, which are 41% for Christians, 48% for non-Christians, and 51% for atheists and agnostics, it just seems like everybody's kind of close to the Christian divorce rate. And it shouldn't be that way. So we're going to go into the leadership principle of teamwork. And when we talk about teamwork, we're talking about unity in the family. And so unity of teamwork is a biblical concept. And we find teamwork in the New Testament and the Old Testament. Now, if we turn to Luke 10:1, it reads as follows. After these things, the Lord appointed other 72 and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself would come. And so 2 by 2 means as a team. We also find it in the Old Testament, Nehemiah 2:17 through 18. And it reads as follows. Then he said unto them, you see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, and let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. And so teamwork is a biblical concept found in the Old Testament and the New Testament, because Nehemiah wanted them to build the wall together, and Jesus sent his disciples out in teams. Teamwork between a Christian husband and wife provides opportunities for encouragement in times of rejection. Teamwork fulfills an organization's visions and goals by providing people an opportunity to work together, which enables them to attain exceptional results. And so before I go in and talk a little bit about one of the major challenges in a marriage, I want to lay some foundational principles. You see, marriages, when you get married, you formulate into one organization. And so if we read Genesis 2:24, it reads as follows. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Ephesians 5:31. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. To cleave means to be joined together, and one means to be united. But some people say, okay, well, that's a biblical perspective, So let's look at it from a naturalistic perspective. Two people form an organization because two people become a pair is a couple is a team is a group, and a group is an organization. And so from a biblical perspective, and even from a natural perspective, when two people become married, they become an organization. Now, this is very important. And this is important because many marriages that are contemplating divorce, or many people involved in a marriage who are contemplating divorce, exhibit characteristics associated with a dysfunctional organization. There are 5 levels to a dysfunctional organization. There's defensive mechanisms, skilled incompetence, defensive routines, fancy footwork, and organizational malaise. And so defensive mechanisms, those are those circumstances that upset us, embarrass us, or threaten us. And what happens over time is we begin to internalize those circumstances. And we develop what we call defensive routines. And defensive routines are automatic skills or automatic responses. And then when we are confronted with our defensive routines, we will deny, we will blame, and we will even distance ourselves from that circumstance or person, which is fancy footwork. And then we further exasperate it by finding fault, only talking about what's negative. We cover up our behaviors and we don't want to talk about it. Well, those are characteristics associated with organizational malaise. And so let's look at some examples in the Bible. So we have Adam and Eve. Now, God told Adam, and this is in Genesis 3:16. Well, I'm going to read 3:15 to 17. It says, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And we talked about that in the first session. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. And so what happened, a catastrophe happened in the Garden of Eden. Adam ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil when God told him not to do it. Adam disobeyed God. But in that whole action, Eve, it says that Eve offered him, or the implication is that Eve offered him a bite of the fruit. But the reality is that God gave instruction to the husband. And so when God came around to inquire, because they were hiding and they had covered themselves up with fig leaves because they discovered they were naked from eating of that tree. They had extra knowledge. Adam's response to God in Genesis 3:12 was, and the man said, the woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I did eat. And so essentially what God did was, first of all, he blamed God. And he said, you gave me this woman, right? And he went to level 5 because now he was covering up his behavior. Because God told him, don't eat it. Let's look at another example. David and Bathsheba. And so as the story goes, David observed Bathsheba taking a bath. And from that, he had intimate relations with her. And so time went by and she found out that she was pregnant. And so the first thing that David tried to do was to blame the pregnancy on Uriah the Hittite, who was Bathsheba's husband. And he told Uriah the Hittite to come on back and have dinner with me. And he gave him meat. And he told, because they were fighting a war, and he said, go home and sleep with your wife. But instead, Uriah the Hittite slept by the gate with the men. And so that's when David was trying to blame by sending him home. But when he found out that Uriah the Hittite didn't go home, then he decided to cover up his behavior by having Uriah the Hittite killed. And his instructions were to put Uriah the Hittite close to the wall so he would be shot down by arrows from the enemy. And so there we have two examples of dysfunctional marriages in the Bible. And so before I go any further, I just want you to remember, defensive mechanisms are those things that upset, embarrass, or threaten us. And as a result, we develop an automatic skill so that we're not upset, embarrassed, or threatened, what we call defensive routines. And so let's look at an example of this husband and wife. Now, the wife's name is Julie. Julie was told that her ideas were foolish. And what happened was, when she was told that, her defensive routine was to agree with the person, and then she would flip her decision. That's what she did. And she married Tom. Now, when Tom was young, he was harassed over things that he cared about. They harassed him about anything that he liked and enjoyed. And so his defensive routine was he just wouldn't get upset about anything. Okay? And so these two got married, and they decided they were having a conversation about going on vacation. And the conversation is as follows. Julie, let's vacation in Hawaii this year. Tom, I don't know if we should do that. Julie, why? Tom, do you think we should keep the money in the bank and vacation where it is less expensive, like a local beach? Julie, we have been saving for this trip for 3 years. We can cut back on some of the extras and still have some money left in the bank. Tom, okay. Julie, Tom, you might be right. Tom, make up your mind. Julie, well, you don't seem to be enthused about going to Hawaii anyway. Tom, why do you always have to change your mind? Julie, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it anymore. So Tom decided that he had to evaluate this disagreement that he had with his wife. And so he used a tool that we call the left-hand column. And he got a piece of paper. He drew a line down the middle. And on the right-hand side, he wrote down the conversation that he was having with his wife, Julie, verbatim. Then on the left-hand side, he wrote down what he was thinking. And the interesting part was, when Julie said, let's go on vacation, he said, it doesn't sound exciting. Remember, he didn't get excited about things. And his response was, I don't know if we should do that. And his thinking was, well, I'm really not interested. And Julie was, why? And his thinking was, well, just take my word for it. Don't we say that a lot of times? And then Tom says, do you think we should keep the money in the bank and vacation where it's less expensive, like a beach? And his thinking was, I want to spend the money on what I want. And then Julie says, well, we've been saving for this trip for 3 years. We can cut back on some of the extras and still have some money left in the bank. And Tom's thinking is, oh, I may get my way. And then Tom says, okay. And he's thinking to himself, thank you. And then Julie says, Tom, you might be right. And then Tom says, she did it again. Tom says, make up your mind. And Tom's thinking, she is so irritating. And Julie says, well, you don't seem to be enthused about going to Hawaii anyway. And Tom's thinking, well, that's just the way I am. And then Tom says, well, why do you always change your mind? And he's thinking now it's her fault. And then Julie says, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And Tom's thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't talk about it at all. And so this is what happens with a lot of our conversations as married people. We go into these defensive routines because we get upset, we feel embarrassed, and then the next thing you know, we shut down the whole communication. That's what happens a lot of times. So how do you overcome it? So on our next activity, and you should have already printed a copy of this, you're going to look at this conversation. You and your spouse, you and your wife, you and your husband. And you're going to do this individually. And you're going to circle where Tom still had an opportunity to ensure that the conversation remained positive. And then you're going to discuss with your wife or your husband that point. And why do you think that was the most important point? And I'm going to give you 5 minutes. You may begin. And so now it's your turn. So I want you to think about the last disagreement that you had with your spouse. Just think about it for a minute. And then I want you to think about what was said during that disagreement. What did you say? What did your spouse say? What was their response? What was your response? And how it went back and forth. Then I want you to do like Tom did. I want you to, there's a handout. You should have already printed it. And so on the right side, I want you to write down what was said. On the left side, and then just write down the whole conversation and write the whole conversation first. Don't do the left side. Do the right side first. And then, and if you need, flip the paper over and write down the rest of the conversation. Okay? And then on the left side, I want you to write down what you were thinking. Okay? Left, right, what you said, what your spouse said, what you said, what your spouse said. And then I want you to circle where you still had an opportunity to ensure that this conversation remained positive. Okay? And then after that, I want you to discuss with your spouse that disagreement and where you could have made sure that that conversation remained positive. And so we're going to take about 10 minutes. And so let me go back over it one more time. So on the right side, you're going to write down what was said in that disagreement by you and your spouse. And you all, this is individual, you may have two different conversations, and that's okay. And then once you write down what was said on the right side, on the left side, you're going to write down what you were thinking. And then you're going to circle that part where you were thinking, where you still could have kept that conversation positive. You're going to share that with your spouse. And then we're going to move on to the next slide. All right? You may begin. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you had an opportunity to have that discussion with your spouse. And so we're going to move forward and we're going to talk about teamwork commitment. Now, I want you to realize something, husbands. When God made the wife, he made the ultimate team player. And we know this from Genesis 3:16. And Genesis 3:16 reads as follows. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And when he said, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, what he was saying was everything she does is going to be focused on you. And if it's focused on you, it's focused on you and her as a team. And that's why I say to you, God made your wife the perfect team player. However, what happens at times is that when we voice our commitment as a team player, we voice it as a complaint. That's what we do. Okay. And so in this example, for example, if the wife says he won't cut the grass or weed the garden, then I know my wife is committed to having a well landscaped house. And so let's take about 2 minutes. I'm not going to walk away or do a timer, but let's take about 2 minutes and let's fill out the other 7, and then we're going to go over. Okay. And so you should have this in your packet. Absolutely. You should have this in your packet. Pull it out and finish up the other 6. Okay, so this is what I have. Number 2, he won't help me clean the house. She is committed to a clean house. Are you committed to a clean house? So that's a good complaint. He does not talk to me. She is committed to communicating with you. Are you committed to communicating with her? If you say yes, then that's a good complaint. He won't help me discipline the kids. My spouse is committed to well-behaved children. Do you want well-behaved children? Yes, of course. That's a good complaint. He doesn't participate in family Bible studies. My spouse is committed to a close relationship for us with God. That's a good complaint. We do not agree on finances. My spouse is committed to financial security. Do you want to be financially secure? Well, then that's a good complaint. He will not forgive me. My spouse is committed to a close relationship with you. Are you committed to a good, close relationship with your spouse? Then that's a good complaint. Okay. And so a lot of times we have to look at the complaint and evaluate what our spouse is committed to. And so there's another piece of paper. It's a blank one. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take that paper and you're going to write down your spouse's top 10 complaints. Okay. And from those top 10 complaints, you're going to write down what your spouse is committed to. Now, this is an individual exercise. And so we're going to take about 15 minutes to complete the entire activity. Once you have finished your top 10 complaints, then I want you to tell your spouse, husband, I want you to tell your wife, and wives, I want you to tell your husbands what you believe that they are committed to. And we're going to take 10 minutes. our session for today. We've talked about teamwork. We've talked about the dysfunctional marriage, which included examples from Adam and Eve, David and Bathsheba. And then we talked about 2 leadership tools to enhance communication and reduce conflict in the marriage. And so this is Dr. Campbell. Of course, you can find us on Facebook. Email address is moreinfo@advancedmarriagetraining.com. If you go to our private Facebook group, Advanced Marriage Training for Couples, if you have any questions for us, we will be more than willing to answer them, and we answer them more quickly when they're on Facebook. And so have a great evening, and thank you very much.